Daniel Jones has the 8th biggest contract in the league. 4 years, $160 million. Dang, that's a lot of money for an average quarterback. Ugh, I'd be disgusted if I was Saquon Barkley. Let's review my fantasy football quarterbacks 11 through 20 for 2023. If you missed 1 through 10, check it out right up here. Quarterback 11, Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson had an absolutely awful beginning to his career as a Cleveland Brown. He only played 6 games, but those were 6 of the worst games of his career. Only 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns. This put him on pace to throw roughly 3,100 yards and 20 touchdowns with 14 interceptions. That's awful. The only bright spot, he was on pace for rushing for almost 500 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now that's good, but is it good enough? Let's look into the last 3 years he played for the Houston Texans to see if we can predict how he'll play moving forward. If we look at the last row, Deshaun Watson's average for his last 3 years with the Houston Texans, he averaged almost 4,300 yards, 28 touchdowns, almost 470 rushing yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns. That's pretty good. But I do see that there was a dramatic jump in his last year with the Texans, almost like he took a step forward. Let's check that out. Looks like with his last year in Houston, he had career highs in both passing yards and passing touchdowns. And his rushing didn't take a dramatic fall down, though his rushing touchdowns did drop by 4. So I say all that to say this. Drafting Deshaun Watson is a bit of a gamble. I don't think he'll be as bad as he was last year because that was horrific. But I don't think that he's going to bounce back to his 2020 form where he threw for 4,800 yards and 33 touchdowns. I think he's going to be somewhere in the middle, around about the average we discussed. Roughly 4,300 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 450-ish rushing yards. Rushing touchdowns are a little up in the air, anywhere between 4 and 6. One thing that will definitely help Deshaun is the fact that he has the 2nd best offensive line in the league. And he's got a pretty solid team around him. So drafting Deshaun is a bit of a gamble. At worst, I think he's middle of the pack. At best, he could be top 5. Now you have to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punks? My millennials and old heads will get that. Drop what movie that's from down in the comments if you get it. What movies? There are multiple correct answers. Quarterback 12, Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is the last quarterback I have in tier 3, which makes sense because I have the most questions about him. Easiest being, is he even a good quarterback? He set his career high in passing yards last year. That's great. Well, it would be if his career high wasn't 3,200 yards. That's pathetic. He also only threw for 15 touchdowns. So then why do I have him so high? Purely because of his rushing. He was able to rush for 700 yards last year and 7 touchdowns. Now that's impressive. Now this is a dramatic jump up from what he normally does. I believe this is due to Brian Daboll joining the Giants as the head coach. He didn't get Coach of the Year votes for no reason. And on a positive note, he was able to decrease his fumbles and his interceptions dramatically. Previously, Daniel Jones was a turnover machine, and now those turnovers are a lot more reasonable. I mean, he started his career off with 30 turnovers in 13 games. He dropped that down to 11 turnovers in 16 games. Pretty good. Daniel Jones has the 8th biggest contract in the league. 4 years, $160 million. Dang, that's a lot of money for an average quarterback. Ugh, I'd be disgusted if I was Saquon Barkley. Daniel Jones is the definition of mid. He gets the New York Giants to the playoffs one time, and they give him the bag. I mean, okay. I can definitely understand why Saquon is frustrated that Daniel Jones got paid and not him. Saquon, one of the best in the league, but Daniel Jones clearly is not in the same class as him. Yet he's getting paid handsomely. I will say this. I do think that the rushing is going to continue for Daniel Jones, mainly because he will be running for his life behind one of the worst offensive lines in the league. PFF has the New York Giants as the 29th ranked offensive line in the league, which I guess is better because they were the 30th last year. Ugh. Quarterback 13, Tua Tagovailoa. Tua is my first player in tier 4. Tua is a lower tier because though he has really high highs, he does have a really low floor. Let's start on a positive note. He has 2 of the fastest wide receivers in the NFL. If you ask Madden, they're the 2 fastest wide receivers in the NFL. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. When you couple that with how accurate Tua is, the sky's the limit. According to my metrics, Tua has an A+ in deep QBR, an A+ in deep yards, and an A+ in deep touchdowns. Basically, when the fastest players in the NFL blow past their defenders, Tua can get it to them pretty well. He's also incredible under pressure. A+ in pressure QBR and A+ in blitz QBR. Well, if he's so good, Mike, then why is he ranked so low? Great question. Well, one of the reasons is he can't stay healthy. He's never played a full game in the NFL the last 3 years. The only 3 years of his career. 13, 10. That's not good. He's missed at least 4 games in every year of his career for a plethora of reasons. 2020 was a thumb sprain. 2021, fractured ribs and a finger fracture. But last year was the scary one. He had at least 2 concussions that we know about and possibly a third. He did not look right getting up in that Buffalo game, but officially it was not a concussion. So we're going to go with 2. That's still a lot. He had an official concussion week 4 against the Cincinnati Bengals where he had to get carted off in a stretcher. Honestly, it was pretty hard to watch. He ended up missing week 5 and 6. When he came back from concussion though, he was on fire. From week 7 to 10, he was quarterback 3 overall. Now that's impressive. That next week was a bye. And after that, he was pretty mid for the rest of the season until he got knocked out again with a concussion that ended his season in week 16. Drafting Tua definitely comes with some risk. I'm concerned that if he gets a concussion, he might not play for a while considering his history of concussions. And if it's bad enough, there's a chance he doesn't play anymore. That being said, when he's on the field, he's pretty good. He was on a 17-game pace last year of 6,400 yards and 33 touchdowns. Not bad. What was bad was his rushing. Tua may be a lot of things, but what he is not is a runner. He only had 70 rushing touchdowns, and even on a 17-game pace, he would have still had less than 100 with 0 touchdowns. In the previous 2 years, Tua's had 3 rushing touchdowns a year. That was before his concussion situation. Now that he's had multiple concussions and his team's trying to keep him healthy, is he going to get more rushing touchdowns? I don't know. Seems kind of risky. And according to PFF, they have a below average offensive line, ranking them at 20th. All in all, Tua Tagovailoa is a risk-reward quarterback. If he's healthy, he has crazy upside. But if you're like me, you're always going to be worried whether or not he's going to get knocked out of the game. So it's kind of a gamble. Can't blame you if you take him though. That upside is nice. Quarterback 14, Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson has a crazy upside. He's the most athletic quarterback to ever do the combine. Now that's saying something. He's got a strong arm and he's crazy fast. Let's check out some of his stats. It looks like he wasn't getting a lot of work his first 2 years. But last year it looks like he played 12 games, 2,500 yards. That's okay. But let's check out his rushing because that's what makes him special. Wow. Now that's a lot of rushing. In 7 games, he had 400 rushing yards. And in 12 games, he had 650. If you'd have done this in the NFL, in 17 games, he would have had 927 yards, 9 rushing touchdowns. Now that's pretty elite from a rushing standpoint. So why do I have him so low? Well, though he is extremely athletic, and I do think that he's going to get a lot of work done on the ground, I also know that rookies can be volatile. In his college career, he really only had 1 year where he was the full-time starter. And though he's crazy athletic, he can be pretty inaccurate at times. I definitely think that he's worth a grab in fantasy football, but I don't think I want to rely on him as a week-to-week starter. If you grab Anthony Richardson, I would also grab a more stable quarterback late in the draft. Like a Geno Smith, Tua Tagovailoa, heck, even Kirk Cousins will give you solid production until we figure out what Anthony Richardson has. I would prefer the first 2 over the latter though. They do have the 10th best offensive line. That will definitely help with this rushing as well as giving him time to throw the ball. Quarterback 15, Aaron Rodgers. That bad, man? Rodgers had one of the worst years in his career last year. He got worse in almost every metric. Losing Devontae Adams might do that to you. Man, was that hard to watch. He threw for 400 less yards, 11 less touchdowns in back-to-back years, and the second most interceptions in his career with 12. Dang, Aaron, 12 interceptions? What are you, trying to be like Dak Prescott? Unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. He also took a hit in his rushing. I didn't even know he had rushing to go down from. He's down to 90 rushing yards, and he went from 3 rushing touchdowns to 1 rushing touchdown. I mean, he even doubled his fumbles with 8. These are the fewest passing yards he's had since 2017. and he only played 7 games that year. So now that we know why Green Bay traded Aaron Rodgers to move on to Jordan Love, why could this year be better for Rodgers? For starter, the Jets are a better team. Garrett Wilson is going to be an elite number 1 with double-digit touchdown upside. And of course, Aaron brought some of his favorite receivers with him. Allen Lazard and Randall Cobb. Breece Hall is also extremely talented. When he's healthy, that defense is pretty good as well. It's going to take me a while to get over the fact that he followed in Brett Favre's footsteps. From Green Bay to the Jets. If he goes to the Vikings in a couple years, I'm going to lose it. There's also some intangibles of why Aaron might play better for the Jets. 1, he's rejuvenated. He actually cares about this team. He's getting to know his young receivers, going to basketball games with them, training in training camp. These are things Aaron Rodgers was not doing when he was a member of the Green Bay Packers. Sometimes it takes being in a new relationship to change some things. You start doing some stuff that you weren't doing in your previous relationship. The grass is green where you water it, Aaron. Water that grass. He also has a chip on his shoulder. Y'all know Aaron Rodgers is petty. He's coming out to show the Green Bay Packers that he's still got it. The last time the Green Bay Packers didn't want Aaron, they drafted Jordan Love. Aaron promptly had 2 back-to-back MVP seasons. I'm not saying that he's going to have an MVP type season, but he's definitely going to try. He went to the Jets to win, not just to play out the rest of his career. I don't think Rodgers is going to do it with his yards, but I do think that he can do it with the touchdown. This is a risk or reward tier. Aaron Rodgers could throw for 35, 40 touchdowns, or he could struggle against 3 of the best defenses in the league, according to Pro Football Focus. Looking at PFF's 2023 NFL defensive line rankings, in Aaron Rodgers' division, we have at 4th, Miami Dolphins, at 7th, the Buffalo Bills, and at 12th, the New England Patriots. That could be rough for a not-so-mobile Aaron Rodgers. And that offensive line, not top tier. On a positive note, the offensive line has gotten better. But on a negative note, they're 23rd in the league. And that's after going up 8 spots. Yikes. And if anybody was questioning whether or not Aaron Rodgers was dedicated to the New York Jets and wanting to win, that narrative has been put to bed. This week, Aaron Rodgers made headlines with a massive restructuring of his contract. The New York Jets signal caller opted to reduce the salary by $35 million over the next 2 years, helping to give his new team a better chance to reconstruct a competitive roster. If that's not being dedicated to the game, I don't know what is. Aaron Rodgers gave back $35 million. He wants to win. Quarterback 16, Russell Wilson. Continuing on tier 4, Russell Wilson was absolutely awful last year. And that's why they replaced the head coach. Nathaniel Hackett's out, Sean Payton's in. If you missed it, Sean Payton went absolutely off on Nathaniel Hackett and how the organization handled Russell Wilson coming last year. It was brutal. It doesn't happen often where an NFL team or organization has been embarrassed, Payton said to USA Today. Trying to win the offseason, the PR, we're not doing any of that. The Jets did that this year. You watch. Hard Knocks, all of it. I can see it coming. This is where it gets a little spicy. I don't know Hackett. A lot of people had dirt on their hands. It wasn't just Russell. He didn't just flip. He still has it. This BS that he hit a wall, shoot, they couldn't get a play in. They were 29th in the league in pre-snap penalties on both sides of the ball. Dang, Sean, tell me how you really feel. He's snapping. That wasn't his fault. That was the parents who allowed it. That's not an incrimination on him, but an incrimination on the head coach, the GM, the president, and everybody else who watched it all happen. Now, he has since backtracked this, after I'm sure management gave him a talking to, as well as the Jets, who may not have had a reason to circle that Broncos game, but that's going to be a fun one to watch. Y'all better win. Talk about who won the offseason. Well, one thing that Sean Payton has going for him is they can't be much worse than they were last year. But when you do all that talking, now you got to perform. Y'all weren't going to have high expectations before, but now that you've done all that yapping, just being pretty good is not going to be good enough. The last time Sean Payton was great, he had a clear first ballot Hall of Famer, Drew Brees. Right now, Russell Wilson's trying to play his way out of the Hall of Fame. Now, I don't think he will actually play his way out of the Hall of Fame, but it's been pretty ugly recently. On a positive note, this team has a solid receiving core, and when they're healthy, a good running back core. Let's dive into Russell Wilson's metrics a little bit closer. I mean, honestly, he was bad in most metrics. 3,500 yards, Ugh. And a 17-game pace of 4,000. Ugly. 16 touchdowns? Are you joking? The worst of his career. 16 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. That's embarrassing. He did get a little bit done on the ground. Almost 300 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. That's all right. Needless to say, they let Russ cook last year, and he burned down the kitchen. Now can Sean Payton build up the house? Back-to-back years with less than 4,000 yards as well. Ugly. The only real positive really is he's going super late in drafts. I think he'll be a solid streamer depending on the week. They have the 11th best offensive line as well. That should help him stay upright and hopefully get it to his receivers. Quarterback 17, Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins stays in tier 4. Kirk Cousins is like the definition of a pretty good quarterback. He doesn't really have top 5 upside, but he's going to stay healthy and throw some touchdowns because he has a pretty good offense. Head coach Kevin O'Connell has been great for this offense, and he loves to pass the ball. The most pass attempts in Kirk Cousins' career with 643, and the second most passing yards in his career with 4,547. Not bad. Almost 30 touchdowns. He did jump up in interceptions from 7 to 14, but he threw it the most in his career. He's bound to make more mistakes. That's his passing, but let's check out his rushing. Not much of a running quarterback. Less than 100 yards rushing, 2 rushing touchdowns. That's okay, I guess. He's really not going to do much for you on the ground. He does have arguably the best wide receiver in football with Justin Jefferson. And Jordan Addison is a very promising rookie. If he can stay out of trouble. Vikings rookie Jordan Addison cited going 140 miles an hour in a 5-mile-an-hour zone. He was cited for speeding and reckless driving. 140 miles an hour? What kind of car was he driving? Oh, found it. Lamborghini Urus. Apparently, very fast. I'm not sure if he's going to get suspended or not. If he is, I'll let you know. Regardless, Kirk Cousins isn't a quarterback I'm looking to draft this year. I do think that he will have some streamable games, so we'll watch out for the matchups against bad defenses and exploit those. And he has an average offensive line at 15. And to round out tier 4, quarterback 18, Jared Goff. Jared Goff is an okay quarterback. Honestly, nothing really special. 4,400 yards, 29 touchdowns. That's the most he's had in the last 4 years. And he's only gone over 30 touchdowns once. And that was back in 2018, and he only threw for 32. On a positive note, he has decreased his interceptions every year for the last 4 years. That's pretty good. Only threw 7 last year. But he's not much of a rusher. He hasn't rushed for 100 yards in the last 4 years, and he hasn't rushed for a rushing touchdown in the last 2 years. He's basically useless on the ground. The Lions are putting together a pretty good roster, though. They drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, who's a great pass-catching running back. David Montgomery is going to be great for touchdowns. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a fantastic PPR receiver. Jameson Williams is going to be great when he comes back from suspension. This kid just can't stay on the field. Last year, he missed time with a torn ACL. This year, he's suspended for 6 games for sports gambling. Come on, Rook. You got to know better. Regardless, we're not drafting Jared Goff. He's a streamer at best. Jared Goff barely made it to tier 4. He's flirting with tier 5 pretty hard. The Lions do have an incredible offensive line, though. 5th. That's up 4 from last year. That's very, very good. I think that he's going to benefit from this, but that doesn't make him worth starting. It is really going to help the running backs, though. Starting tier 5, Derek Carr. Derek Carr has supported some great wide receivers in his time, and tight ends, and Darren Waller. But he hasn't been really fantasy relevant himself. He didn't do that with a lot of touchdowns, though. He has not thrown 30 touchdowns since 2015. That's really bad. And 2 years ago, he had an outlier year for yards. 4,800. Whereas if we look at the rest of his career, he's only thrown for 4,000 yards 4 times. And he's thrown for less than 4,000 yards 5 times. Last year happened to be one of those times. Even if we look at his 17-game pace, he still wouldn't have hit 4,000 yards. And on top of that, he's had back-to-back years with 14 interceptions. Ugh, that's ugly. Let's check out his rushing. Maybe that gets better. Nope, still bad. Barely 100 rushing yards and 0 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 years. So he's not getting done with his rushing. Also, last year was a huge drop in his passing yards. He went from 4,800 down to 3,500. Now, he didn't play 17 games, but he had a 17-game pace of almost 4,000 yards. Still went down 800. That's a lot. His fumbles did drop from 13 to 4, though. That's pretty good. I will say this. He probably is going to have the best receiving core he's had in a while, and he has a great running back in Alvin Kamara. I do think that there will be games where he's fantasy relevant, but he's not worth drafting. He's going to be a streamer. If we start him, it's going to be one of those great matchups. Terrible defense. All in all, he's got a pretty solid receiving core. Chris Olave and whatever Michael Thomas has left. Running backs are pretty good. Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller. You're definitely not drafting him though. If anything, he's a streamer. And last and definitely least, quarterback 20, Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford falls down here for a multitude of reasons. He has a great option to pass to Cooper Kupp, but other than that, he really doesn't have much. Cam Akers is meh, doesn't catch the ball a lot. Lost OBJ. He's going to have to rely on Van Jefferson, who could be pretty solid, I guess. Last year, Matthew Stafford only played 9 games due to his injury, plural. In March 2022, Stafford had an elbow infection, which caused him not to throw in OTAs. Stafford didn't throw during Los Angeles voluntary OTAs due to inflammatory injection he received in his elbow this offseason. Then in August, that elbow flared up again. He had an elbow sprain. Stafford dealt with elbow tendonitis, and while he, quote, did not get to a place he really needs to be, after an offseason procedure, he was fine for week 1. Fine is not what I want to hear you say when you're talking about my quarterback's elbow. Back to the injuries, because that wasn't all. Fast forward to November 6th, he had a concussion and entered the concussion protocol. Then the big one, November 20th, spinal cord bruise. That sounds really painful. Stafford was placed in concussion protocol following the injury, and he didn't really play after that. He only played 9 games. And in the 9 games he played, he didn't really play very well. If you take the 9 games and you spread it out to a 17-game pace, he still would not have thrown for 4,000 yards. He wouldn't have thrown for 20 touchdowns. Now, this is a dramatic drop from his 2021 season, where Cooper Kupp dominated. That year, he had almost 4,900 yards and 41 touchdowns. And 17 picks. Now, the injury does concern me, especially because he gets all of his work done in the air and he's not a rushing quarterback. So at the moment, at best, I see him as a streamer in good matchups, but he does have upside if he can stay healthy. He does have one of the best wide receivers in football. When you're drafting quarterbacks this late, you need to know which ones to pick. If you're looking for a quarterback drafted past round 7, but has top 5 upside, click here.